linked with his concerns for the environment. Capitalist emphasis on profit leads to disasters such as the Rana Plaza tragedy in Bangladesh in 2013. Globalisation and technological change have made employment in the 21st century precarious. Zero-hour contracts, those in work working longer hours, fears around the robotisation of work. We see food banks, rising numbers of homeless people, people in work receiving benefits because their wages are inadequate. Levels of inequality are greater now than at any time in the last 100 years. I just had a quick look at the Oxfam report for New Zealand for last year. The two richest men in New Zealand, their wealth rose by 1.2 billion. The bottom 26% of society saw their share of the wealth fall by 26%. I think that tells us all we need to know. Vast areas of the surface of the planet and its wildlife are being destroyed to satisfy capitalist greed. Palm oil production in Southeast Asia, mining and timber in the Amazon rainforest, for example. Our waste pollutes the atmosphere and leads to devastating climate change, and it pollutes the oceans. There is no square mile of Earth's inhabitable surface that is not beautiful in its own way, if we men will only abstain from destroying it, said Morris. And I am struck, reading the work of George Monbiot, how many echoes of Morris I find in here. So George Monbiot, probably one of the leading ecological commentators of the present day, and I've just put a few markers in there to show where I think Morris said that. That's Morris would totally agree with that. So Caroline Lucas, one of the leaders of the Green Party in the UK, has also testified to her admiration for Morris and his influence upon her thinking. Reimagining the future of work is a pressing issue for society. Those who dispute this argue that automation and digitalisation of work will expand production, create additional employment opportunities and lead to economic growth. They ignore the fact that there are environmental, social and political consequences of indefinite growth, and we're seeing those now. Morris's insight into work, I would argue, is as significant as that of Marx's unalienated labour. Indeed, Morris arrived at the same conclusion as Marx. But he also emphasised the power of imagination, urging workers to have vivid images of their own ideal society in order to bring about a change. His own utopia was a place where everyone was equal, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs, enjoying a simple but creative life. He sheds light on the failure of so-called socialist regimes, and needless to say on capitalist society, where work was, and always is, toil. We can see in Morris, I would suggest, the beginnings of a 21st century economy. 1. Reduced levels of production to maintain employment. 2. A good quality of working life. 3. A shift in emphasis from quantity to quality. And 4. A concern for environmental limits. Morris has been claimed by many, but he is in fact a distinctive and original thinker, an extraordinarily astute critic of capitalist society and the damage it does to human beings, their social relations and their natural and built environments. He was no idle dreamer. Uniquely, he realised that the human imagination is the key to change rather than declarations of principle and dry policy. As both a revolutionary socialist and a utopian in the best sense of that word, he aimed to develop the radical imagination of alternative ways of life, which would be ecologically and socially sustainable, in which both social responsibility and personal freedom are given equal emphasis, and which would deliver a deeper and wider happiness than is currently possible. Thank you. And I'd just like to mention, if I may, the William Morris Society. William Morris Society UK, which is a sort of umbrella organisation. There is a society in the USA, there is a society in Canada. New Zealand currently proudly boasts 0 members, unless we count me as a sort of honorary visiting member. If you become a member, you get a magazine 3 times a year, and you get a journal twice a year. There is a website, there is also a Morris archive, where you can get all of Morris's works just about there, and the Marxist archive without having to go out and purchase them. And I've mentioned those there, and you can find the William Morris Society on Facebook as well. So a little plug for the society there. And then just to round off, if I can, I've been doing some research on Morris in New Zealand, so I'm just going to throw some snippets out there of where I've got to, and then if anybody in the audience, either now or at any future time, can point me in the direction of anything, that would be absolutely fantastic. I've read a couple of books by a lady called Anne Calhoun, who very clearly identifies Morris's influence on art and design education in New Zealand and the arts and crafts movement here. And the arts and crafts movement in New Zealand is interesting because it took a totally different direction to the one that it took in the UK. In 1906 and 1907 there was an international exhibition of the arts and crafts here in Christchurch. Huge affair, tremendously successful, and Morris and Company exhibited there. Alexander Turnbull, who founded the National Library of course, had a full collection of all 53 volumes of the Kelmscott Press and collected other Morris materials as well. And I came across a letter in the art gallery here at an old couple in Auckland in the 1980s who had a collection of Morris and Company textiles. And the guy was writing to the art gallery saying, "But we don't know where they've gone and we can't trace any of them, can you help?" And the answer was no. You have some Morris and Company stained glass in Canterbury, 3 churches, one at Merivale, can't remember the other two off the top of my head, but they were post-World War I stained glass windows, commissioned as commemorations for people who died in the war, commissioned by the families, but nonetheless, they were designed by J.H. Dirl from Edward Burne-Jones Designs, and they're still pretty good stained glass windows, well worth looking. Ken Hall at the Art Gallery introduced me to an architect called Samuel Hurst Seeger, who was responsible for a lot of Christchurch's most admired and handsome buildings, who he said was heavily influenced by Morris. Politically, there's little bits, snippets here and there. So the New Zealand Socialist Party was in large part founded by a group of people called the Clarion Settlers, 4 shiploads of people who read the Clarion and who came across, emigrated to New Zealand in 1900. It's an intriguing story, and I won't bore you with the details of the story, but the Clarion newspaper, as you've seen, was a big supporter of Morris. Its masthead is "Fellowship is life, lack of fellowship is death," which is a quotation from Morris. So all of those 200 would clearly have known of Morris, and seeing as the founding meeting of the New Zealand Socialist Party, with 33 there present, 15 of them were Clarion settlers. There was also a socialist church here in Christchurch in the late 1880s, formed by a guy called Harry Atkinson, and in the first issue of their monthly leaflet and in the paper that he produced for 3 or 4 months, there's a couple of quotes from Morris and references to Morris, so clearly a little bit of influence there. Jack McCullough, the Christchurch trade unionist, I found in his diaries, refers to reading Morris. And an intriguing guy called Philip Joseph, an anarchist tailor in Auckland, sold Morris pamphlets. There was, of course, the Morris and Company exhibition in Christchurch in 2008, and I got quite excited by that. But it was a travelling exhibition from South Australia, from the Adelaide Art Gallery, and it was about Morris and Company, and there was not one single mention of his politics in there at all. In fact, the guy at the Art Gallery said it was all furniture and furnishings, and if they hadn't have gathered together some Kelmscott Press items and 1 or 2 other things, that is all it would have been. Nonetheless, it attracted 25,000 visitors, people coming from as far away as Invercargill and Auckland, so clearly there were people who were aware of Morris, interested in Morris, and wanted to come and have a look. And finally, and I only came across this a few days ago, Tom at the start there mentioned Avon Luke Cottage, and the woman who was instrumental in that was Elsie Locke, who was a CP member in New Zealand, a pacifist and what have you. And I suddenly discovered that she and others founded the William Morris Group in 1954, which ran for 10 or 11 years. And what it was a like a performing arts group, I suppose. The aim, she said, in the words of William Morris, we aim at an art for the people and by the people as a benefit to the maker and its user. And in addition to doing concerts and readings and writing groups and all these sorts of things, they also did lunchtime performances at factory gates and things like that in order to try and get... So that was really intriguing. So I'll do a little bit more work about that. Just to finish on a more humorous note though, so if you're ever thinking of fundraising, Tom, so 18 months after its formation, the William Morris Group, they ran out of money. So they searched around for some ideas and they said, we'll have a raffle. Great, okay, so the following meeting they came like, yeah, and the prizes. This is 1956. First prize was £5 worth of, and the second prize was £3 worth of, and the third prize was £1 worth of. Would anybody like to guess? Pardon? No. This should be our next fundraiser. It was £5 worth, £3 worth, and £1 worth parcels of underwear. Men's or women's, depending on who won the prize. And on that note, I'll finish. So, happy to take, if anybody can help with any of that New Zealand stuff, I'd be grateful, but happy to take any